here's my story. I was supposed to be flying to St. Kitts in the Caribbean on Friday. I'm working with the Prime Minister and his cabinet on a number of different transformation things. It's the stuff that I do and I love. And I'm not going because a number of the Caribbean airports still haven't returned to full function because the airspace has been under embargo because of what's been going on in Venezuela. So let's just jump right in. Make this make sense, please.
Well, we can try to sort of get through what is really going on, and I think it's fair to say this is one of those events where there were warning signals. There were indicators pointing to the fact that we are nearing the time where the US is going to start clearing up its backyard and to start shaping those that it deems to be a threat to its trade, but also security. It's time to address these issues, and no longer can we just talk about them, but we need to actually deal with them. I think the situation with Venezuela is as much as it has come as a surprise, I think it's also not so much of a surprise, other than the idea that within the space of 90 minutes, 2 hours, the US has flown into Venezuela, ripped its leader out, and got him en route to New York. I don't think any of us quite expected that this would be the route to addressing the problem, but it has had multiple benefits, and particularly in the contrast of some of the issues that Trump is trying to deal with. And we're talking about an individual that has taken great pride in his negotiation ability, his ability to do deals. But actually, some of the bigger issues that he's faced since coming into his second term last January actually have proven more difficult for him to solve. So I do think that the situation with Venezuela has had multiple benefits, one of which I think is demonstrating to the world that the price of Russian security is probably not worth this paper it's written on. I think the way, and I'm sure you've seen the same clips that I've seen with the Americans directing, endless amounts of military power at Russian defense systems, and then just a few minutes later, in come a series of helicopters ready to do in the space of an hour and a half, what maybe to some extent the Russians have been trying to do for the last three and a half years in terms of removing Zelensky. I think the other advantage is it does start to address some of the significant strengths that China has into the path of America, and particularly in terms of the context of oil, but also in terms of some of the political influence within the wider South America region. So I think that this is, again, an opportunity for America to demonstrate that the outcomes of a US versus China conflict, and I just don't see that happening anytime soon whatsoever. But the question is well debated, and I think this is a good opportunity for the US to remind its neighbors that you may or may not like us, but we are the military power in this part of the world, and you will follow what we need, and you will give to us what we need in order to make sure that we are protected, the US is protected, and that our interests are met, whether from a friend or a foe. So I think that this is consistent. I think the trade, what we saw last year with the US, the Liberation Day, the tariffs, all seem to me to be step one of a much bigger plan that President Trump has had since coming into office. I think what he's been able to get out of the last year is to see the strengths of how nations will negotiate, to see where the weaknesses are, particularly Europe. And I do worry about how he has assessed the weaknesses of Europe in the context of his grab for Greenland. He's made no secret of his view that Europe is weak. And in many respects, the way in which Europe responded to the trade negotiations last year may demonstrate beyond Trump that yes, there are major weaknesses that prevent Europe being the power that it could be. So I think that this is step two of a much greater grab on control in the Western Hemisphere, and I think there's a lot more to come. And what worries me the most is knowing with the midterms and the cost of living issues in the US, the way in which the MAGA movement is being split through some of his actions, the disregard for some of the democratic processes as well, committing acts of war. without going through due process, i.e., Congress, is going to come into question after the midterms. And so he's going to lose a lot of capacity to run the country, to fulfill his ambitions and to fulfill his agenda in the way that he is currently doing after the midterms. And so I think this year is the year where firms, where business leaders need to be prepared when we describe the word uncertainty for what is going to be most unexpected, most unbelievable. Those scenarios that normality bias just prevents you from believing can be true. This is the year that we need to look at the world in a very different lens and to take Trump by his word and prepare for what could be quite a dysfunctional year as we respond to his agenda.